Welcome to Paul Ponders. My name is Paul Solano of PS&L Marketing Group, and I may be reached via email at paul@paulponders.com. Thank you for joining me for my foray into podcasting. It is great to be collaborating with my friend and associate Chalonzo Amos of PodPro Entertainment to bring you some fun, exciting, and informative podcasts. For many years, I've been referred to as the connector, or in Greater Boston circles as the connector. With PSNLmarketinggroup.com, I've created a side gig to connect you and get things done. Please sit back and relax and listen to today's podcast. If you are driving or operating heavy machinery and just listening, then please just listen and stay focused on your task at hand. Thanks again for listening. Enjoy my ponderings. Let #PaulPonders begin. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Paul Ponders. You know, this has been a lot of fun. I've been able to release quite a few podcasts, and I want to thank you all for your subscriptions, just logging in, tuning in, subscribing, stopping me in the streets, just saying, Paul, great job. We really enjoy your podcasts. Well, I'm trying to keep this really fun and exciting. And through the course of time, things I must experience, TIME, I have met many people. And two of the most dynamic individuals who I have met in the course of my journey of time, things I must experience, are with us on this podcast. So welcome to this episode of Gotham Whale. And with me on this podcast, I have two great gentlemen. And this is probably one of the only times this will happen. It's Paul Ponders all across the board. Paul Ponders, Paul Cubed, we'll call it. But it's about Gotham Whale. So we're very happy to have with us Mr. Paul L. Sieswerda and Mr. Paul J. Sieswerda. Paul and Paul, welcome.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Great to have you here. So let's start off with Paul Sr., Malden High, class of 1961, the executive director and founder of Gotham Whale. Paul L. Sieswerda?
Yes, I grew up in Malden, and I'm very pleased to have that background, excellent education from Malden High School. And I do have to correct you that it was class of 1960. My friends like Norman Greenbaum, who's very famous for Spirit in the Sky, would certainly jump on that. So I want to correct that immediately, that it's class of 1960. And I'm proud to be a Maldonian and had a long career in getting to where I am with Gotham Whale.
That is awesome. Well, if you just want to let our audience know about your history with working as a curator at the New England Aquarium and other places, you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I appreciate that. That it was something I always say that I was kind of struck down like another Paul in the Bible on the road to Damascus when he was struck down with visions. But I was struck down shortly after my graduation from Malden High and became very intrigued with the excitement around ocean exploration and development. It was the time of Jacques Cousteau, and everyone was looking for the next frontier, be it in space, which was taking place, but it was also in the area of underwater exploration. And Jacques Cousteau was a fabulous inspiration to me, and I said, well, I want to get involved in that field. And fortunately for me, the aquarium was being developed in Boston, and I got my foot in the door, so to speak, because I was able to get a job as a volunteer and let them know that I was interested in working there. And the volunteer job turned into an entry position as an aquarist, one who cares for the fish, keeps the glass clean and the the tanks clean and the fish fed, and all of that was my first position. And I was able to, I sometimes say, skyrocket to the middle in in about 20 years, and ended up as curator of fishes and mammals. And then I went to the New York Aquarium and held a similar position in that institution for 21 years in New York City.
Wow, that is a great summation of a great career with those two aquariums. Now, I have heard a story. If you want to share a story about the serpent, I believe. If you want to, this is a great story that I want our listeners to hear.
Sure, I was I was involved in what became known as the Scituate Sea Serpent. And one of the things I wanted to say is one of my great blessings was that I was able to involve PJ, as we call the younger Paul Sieswerda, or Paul J. Sieswerda. I was able to involve him in some of my aquatic adventures. And actually, that was one of the first ones because I think he was probably about a 5-year-old child when I was called to investigate the Scituate Sea Serpent. Now, PJ probably doesn't have too much of a recollection because he was so young, but what happened was I'm going to call it a sea serpent, washed up on the beach in Scituate, Mass. And of course, the call came in kind of early evening on I think it was a fall day. It was a very nice Indian summer day, and it was also a weekend. So there was nobody around the aquarium kind of except me. And I got the call to go investigate and represent the aquarium because the aquarium was the focal point of anything that unusual happening in the waters around Boston and the vicinity. So at that time, I had a 53 Buick. So I loaded my wife and two little boys into this 53 Buick and drove down to Scituate to investigate. Now, you have to understand that I was just a beginning aquarist, so my expertise in this field was just beginning. I was just getting my toe wet into the field of oceanography and ichthyology and all the things that I became more familiar with over the years. But I showed up on the beach and there was a giant crowd around this massive decomposing body that was on the beach. And so I went down the beach, and the chief of police came over and said, "Oh, here's the guy from the aquarium. What are you going to do with it?" And of course, there was 30 feet of maybe 3,000 pounds of rotting flesh on the beach. And so I hadn't considered what I was going to do with it, of course. And I said, "Well, I've got a kitchen knife here, and I think I'll cut the head off, and then you can bury the rest." He was able to push back the crowd.
As my dad said, I don't really remember that, but I do, admire those stories. When people ask me, how come you never really got involved in oceanography or your father does? I said, because I smell like fish. I didn't want a career that I smelled like rotting fish.
Well, I'm sorry about that, PJ. I didn't know I came home smelling like fish or rotting sea serpent. So anyway, what happened was we investigated what was on the beach, and it was like I say, a nice fall night, and all of the students from the various colleges around Boston were on the beach, and they were just looking for souvenirs, if you can imagine, souvenirs of taking little pieces of rotting flesh off this thing. So the police had to create a barricade, and I took this kitchen knife and just cut what was being called a head off of this form, and figured that I could bring it back and get the real experts to identify what it was. But as I was cutting through the vertebrae, I could tell that it went very smoothly. Rather than being bone, it was cartilage. And I knew enough that that probably indicated a shark. And from the size of it, there's only kind of two creatures, even though a great white gets close to that size, not 30 feet. basking sharks and whale sharks get that big. Whale sharks are in warmer waters, so I knew I kind of eliminated that creature. So I said, well, this is a basking shark. So fast forward to the next day, I was interviewed by the local TV stations. I was not very savvy or accustomed to being interviewed, and it was a difficult process for me to deal with, especially at that time when the cameras were these giant whirring creatures that they stuck in your face and asked the people to go live on camera. So this was my first experience of being live for an interview, and I don't think it went that well because I stumbled over words like cartilaginous and things that were kind of outside my wheelhouse of knowledge. Now, simultaneous to this, there was a local radio commentator, local author whose name was Edward Rose Snow. And he was also being interviewed by the local media. And he was saying things like, I don't see how anyone who sees this creature, this sea serpent with the head of a camel, the neck of a giraffe, and the body of a whale could be a shark. I say it's a sea serpent, and I don't know what the ridiculous comments about shark are at all. So they juxtaposed me with one clip saying shark. We think it's probably a basking shark, and then this other commentator, very stylish and very polished, would come on and say, shark, it's got the head of a camel, the neck of a giraffe, and the body of a whale. How could anyone say that? So what it turned out to be, that it did look like a head of a camel, a neck of a giraffe, and the body of a whale. But what had happened was during the decomposition of this animal, it had lost its entire mouth structure and gills. And so all that was sticking out from the body of the fish was this long vertebrae and the chondrocranium of the head of the basking shark. And that really did look like a sea serpent, I have to say. And so there was this controversy that was kind of our first experience in being interviewed. And it was probably PJ's first experience on being involved with me and some of my adventures at the aquarium.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that great story. And PJ, if you want to chime in, I know in the past you've mentioned something about when your dad came home, smelled like a fish, whatever. If you want to elaborate on that story.
Well, I'm trying to remember back to a 5-year-old boy and how my journey ended up going down the paths I went. I couldn't say condocranium or anything like that. So I decided to go to the vocational school and try a crack at carpentry. So I was doing that path, but also keeping in touch with a lot of trips and things that Dad was doing, going to Bimini and doing collecting trips. And I always had a knack for that adventure. And so I would follow in those footsteps and go on trips with him to collect the fish for the aquarium and go to the sea serpent situation and anything that he would drag me to, and I would try to enjoy it as best I can, even though it smelled like fish.
I love it. I love it. Now, PJ, you have shared a story with me about a very special birthday party you had many, many years ago, and it involved Cecil the seal.
Cecil the seal is a very dear story, and again, this is probably 5 years after the sea serpent. At my 10th birthday, there was some seals that had washed up on the beach without any mother to care for it and care for them. I believe there was like 5 to 7 of them, but we were involved with trying to care for them because the people at the aquarium had to feed them round the clock, and they were not able to get into the aquarium early or leave late, or they were getting sick and tired of that. So my dad had the bright idea of, let's just take them home and feed them at home and care for them if from the bathtub or a little pool we set up in the back. So it was my 10th birthday. My dad showed up with a seal in a Tupperware container. We had fun. The kids, it wasn't a pony that we couldn't ride it, but we had a lot of laughs, and people would drive by and look at the dog with no legs. They're like, what's going on over here? So that was an interesting youth growing up with sea serpents and seals and the attention of the neighborhood. It was really something. And not to mention, dad being in the aquarium, we had access to a lot of special trips around the giant ocean tank and shaking hands with the octopus. Bring my friends into these special behind the scenes. And I think the statute of limitations has expired, Dad. I hope we're not going to get you in trouble. But yeah, we would have kids in the back shaking hands with octopuses and getting a little out of hand, no pun intended. The tentacles getting wrapped around people's arms and, almost getting out of the tank and stuff like that. And just super interesting to be part of that as a youth, and just growing into what now is Gotham Whale.
That always was okay and sanctioned with me looking over your friends and making sure that they didn't do anything harmful to the animals. So we don't have to worry about that. You also got a chance to dive in the giant ocean tank as you grew up and got your scuba certification and went on dive trips with us, and you went to some very exotic trips on your own as well. So I think it's been a good connection to the ocean, and I'm very pleased that PJ has been able to share a lot of that with me.
Yeah,
That's great.
it seems like it's going in 5-year intervals. So the Scituate Sea Monster was 5 years old, Cecil was 10, and then I did my dive certification in the giant ocean tank when I think I was 15. So it's just parlaying into years of 5.
That is really great. And when we look at Gotham Whale, we have this organization that sounds like it's a New York based organization. It obviously is, but there's a lot of overlap with what's going on up in the Boston area. And the Atlantic Ocean is really a vast ocean and all. But what about that Boston New York rivalry? Is it true that the Gotham Whales have pinstripes? What's that all about?
That's good, Paul. I like that. No, they don't have pinstripes, but the model for everything that Gotham Whale does has been done in Massachusetts and Maine for many, many years. I was witness to that at the aquarium while I was on staff there. And of course, everything has become more specialized now. Back in the day, so to speak, no one today could bring a seal home and put it in their bathtub and raise it for 5 weeks. That is all highly regulated and specialized to authorized organizations that do that kind of work now. And back in the beginnings of these things, I was part of the development of how to respond to animals on the beach. And all of that has translated into more and more specialization, response teams that go out and collect animals. But at that time, it was pretty much anyone that could help did, and the aquarium staff had to add on these special assignments along with their regular duties. And as PJ said, that became kind of overwhelming, and so we brought those seals home, and we had some really remarkable experiences in doing that.
That's tremendous. Now, I've heard so much about citizen science. What exactly is citizen science, and how does that tie into Gotham Whale?
Well, that is a new approach that we're applying. Gotham Whale is, as I said, modeled on some of the established organizations in Massachusetts, the New England Aquarium and its stranding program, the Center for Coastal Studies, and Allied Whale up in Maine. And I was involved in New York and retired in 2009 and became connected to a commercial whale watch boat called the American Princess. And I was just going out during winter season to look at seals. Now, there was a long history up in Massachusetts and Maine of seals kind of expanding their population every season so that they came down to Massachusetts. And each year that became more and more common, and the seals became more and more plentiful. Now, they did have a change in the dynamic of which species was predominant, and that was the harbor seals were the first pioneers. They are the cute little seals that people are probably familiar with as stuffed animals, and they have a short nose, and the gray seals, which are larger and more aggressive, tend to push them out of their areas. And so that happened kind of while, I won't say nobody was looking, but researchers really didn't pay attention to that transition. And nowadays in Massachusetts, the dominant population is gray seals. And not only are they in abundance, but they also stay around all year long. Now, in New York, we only see them during the winter season from November until May, but we're getting more and more gray seals, and they are staying longer and longer. So I am kind of predicting that the same movie that was previewed in Massachusetts will be playing in New York waters in the near future. Now, it'll probably take a few years, but it's very important to know and maybe mitigate some of the concerns that have developed over the abundance of gray seals here in Massachusetts. There's year-round seals which attract great white sharks. Now, not only are there great white sharks, but there's bathers and surfers and all kinds of human interaction on Cape Cod. And so when the interface of wildlife and humans come together, sometimes there's conflicts. And unfortunately, there has been some fatalities in Massachusetts due to the great white shark attacks. And that's going to be a concern. And I'm afraid that the same kind of scenario is going to take place in New York waters over time.
Now, Paul, PJ,
Yep.
you and I have spoken about the rivalry of Boston, New York, and I know quite a few months ago there was a comedy show regarding the Boston, New York battles of yesteryear and all. And I know that you have some plans as a marketing representative and coordinator.
Yeah, so this new venture that I'm going down to help my dad with his nonprofit, bring in the awareness of what his organization is doing, the fun stories, but also the research. I'm looking to have some fun with it as well. We've done a comedy show down at Pearl Street Station with a lot of local comedians that I'm very friendly with, kids I grew up with, Paul Gilligan, Dave Russo, working on some other comedians to grow that into a rivalry to have fun with comedians from New York and have like a laugh off is what I'm looking to do, and grab some big comedians. Bill Burrs and Pete Davidson is the stars we're shooting for. That's what I foresee for Gotham Whale. And my dad always has this dream to show the Gotham Whale logo in the sky, almost like the Batman logo. Those of you who don't know what the Gotham Whale logo is, it's a whale tail with the skyline of New York. My dad has that vision of shining up the Gotham Whale logo in the New York skyline. I'm looking to have a lot of comedians make fun of that if they want.
I think that's quite possible. We'll have a whale of a time doing that, I'm sure.
Amen.
Paul Sr., you are an author,
I am, thank you.
and I believe a children's book, Big Whale, Big City. Do you want to tell me about that
I
book?
sure would. It's the story of Jerry the whale, which is pretty much a real life story of a particular whale that we think of a Gotham Whale's kind of mascot or iconic photograph that was taken by a photographer, Artie Raslich, that just happened to catch this whale spy hopping, which means kind of coming up straight out of the water and just looking around. And he captured a shot that had the whale spy hopping with the Empire State Building in the background, kind of all lined up in one crystal clear shot that said Wales and New York City. And so we have taken that story of Jerry and kind of traced the development of young whales coming to New York City for the good food that New York is famous for, which happens to be Menhaden currently, and having this kind of storyline that traces the growth of the whale coming up from tropical waters where the humpback whales go to breed and give birth, and its mother saying goodbye with a little tear in her eye. And as Jerry the whale goes to explore new areas, he tells his friends and they come. And this is exactly the history of what has transpired since 2011. Very few whales were in the New York area prior to that. And now we are well, I should mention some of the work that Gotham Whale does is to build a catalog of individual whales. We know the whales from their flukes, or the underside of their tail fin. It's like a fingerprint that we can identify the pattern of the coloring of that fluke and give them an identification number. And we've been able to do that. We just passed 300 individuals that we've been able to identify in the New York area. And by going out and getting the information of where we see these whales, what their behavior is like, when they appear, when they leave, all of this information is building a really comprehensive picture of where, when, and someday maybe why the whales are doing what they're doing in New York waters. Very, very important information for any kind of mitigation and making decisions for science and conservation. So we do this primarily through citizen science. That is the people on board the commercial whale watching boats, as well as fishermen and beach walkers or anyone that sees a whale. They're able to get the information, take a picture. Everyone has pretty sophisticated equipment in their smartphones that tracks the location, GPS location, and all that goes into a database that is very valuable for knowing about whales and what they do.
Now, where's your organization headquartered?
Well, pretty much wherever I happen to be. But primarily out of my residence on Staten Island. And we operate out of that. And I've been up in Massachusetts back and forth for some time. And as I say, working with PJ to develop our marketing and our exposure. And again, the parallels are so complete and perfect between New York and Massachusetts and Boston area. And the history of what took place at the New England Aquarium is playing out in New York as we speak.
That's great. Now, if anyone wants to find out more information about Gotham Whale, where do they go for that?
Pretty simple, gothamwhale.org. And we're very active. I have a great team of volunteers who support Gotham Whale by managing our social media and collecting all this data and turning it into peer-reviewed publications that can be used for science and conservation. So anyone can go to gothamwhale.org, but follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
That's great. Now, PJ, we had talked about book signing for Big Whale, Big City, and that is on March 14th, National Pie Day at Pearl Street Station.
Yeah, looking forward to that. I do want to thank you for all your help with all these things, Paul. You've been a great ally to jump into this full bore with podcasts and comedy shows and inspired me to even be this type of marketer person and event coordinator. And I'm really enjoying this along with my dad's stories. One of them being that I found out not too long ago sometime when I went on a whale watch in New York this past summer that a gentleman from Israel did a documentary on my dad, and that's in a movie setting that we're going to premiere up in the Boston area, along with Roger Payne is in this film, and a woman from Scotland who plays the violin to the wildlife. So it's really cool things, and I love all the storylines that come out of this work that my dad does, and the comedy and the entertainment that we're doing is just having fun with it.
I love it. I love it. And I've heard so many great stories over the past couple of years about your dad's interactions with celebrities. And I love a Bobby Orr story. Feel free to share a Bobby Orr story when he was playing for the Boston Bruins, hearing at the aquarium and your dad giving him a tour.
Sure. My boys were involved in hockey, and of course, Bobby Orr was an inspiration to everyone in the Boston area during those Bruins glory years. And it was a real treat for me to show him behind the scenes. And as PJ said, let him shake hands with the octopus, which I think was a big treat for him. And he sent me a signed picture of himself, which I had framed and kept on my desk for the whole 41 years of my career. His signature faded away. And so just recently, through PJ's connections, I got a call from Bobby Orr.
I'll take it from there because there's some backstory to the years that my dad did show Bobby Orr behind the scenes till the late story that just developed. And I wanted to reach out to Bobby Orr to reconnect because after he toured with my dad, he wrote him a beautiful thank you typed letter from his desk and saying, "Thank you so much for this tour. We had a great time. My wife, kids really enjoyed it, educational. If there's anything I can do for you in the future, please reach out." Well, 30 some odd years later, I decided to try to hunt him down and see if he could give my father a call and maybe reminisce a little bit, maybe help out with Gotham Whale or just to say hello. So I reached out to people that I know, and by happenstance, Bobby Orr called me on a couple Wednesdays ago, and I was having a little heated morning where things weren't going too well, and I answered the phone in a huff, and I was like, "Who's this?" And he said, "This is Bobby Orr," and it just turned my day around. And he said that he was going to call my dad. He was wondering what time's a good time. I said 10 or so, and it came in on a no caller ID. So I tried to tell my dad he better not miss this call. So I called him up. I said, "I just got off the phone with Roger Payne about the movie, and he'd like to talk to you about a couple things, so don't miss this call." And Roger's an icon in his whale world, and I'm thinking my dad's not going to want to miss that call. So he took the call, called me back. He said, "PJ, he called." And I said, "How did it go?" He says, "Oh, it went great. I told him some jokes, and we laughed, and we talked about the aquarium and couple other things." And he says, "But it was strange. He said he was Bobby Orr." I said, "Dad, he that was Bobby Orr." He said, "How did you get Bobby Orr to call me?" I said, "How did you go through a whole conversation not knowing you're talking to Bobby Orr?"
I really blew that one
I love
because
it.
Roger Payne is the fellow that first recorded the song of the humpback whale and really set off the whole Save the Whale effort during the 70s. And he's a legend, the same as Bobby Orr is. And so I was very pleased. And Bobby, as usual, was gracious enough not to let on that he was talking to somebody that wasn't making any sense.
What a great story. I also heard that you were a guest scuba diver at a Boston Bruins
Ex-
retirement party. Is
exactly.
that true?
Johnny Busick who was a staple of the Bruins, longtime star, he retired and they threw a party at the aquarium. And so I made sure that I was on duty to be the person in the tank to feed the fish as entertainment for the event. And I put a big 9 on the back of my scuba tank and went down to the bottom of the tank with a hockey stick and pretended to play around with the puck underwater. And I think they were all drinking and, and boozing it up. And I don't even know if they saw me underwater, but I sure had a good time to play that little role.
That is great. That is a great story. Well, Johnny Busick, the chief, used to skate circles around the players, and you were definitely scuba diving in the
That's
big
right.
aquarium. That's great. That is awesome. Well, this has just been a great experience. I've really enjoyed this podcast, and we hope to have you back again when we find out more about the research, the great research you're doing with gothamwhale.org. And also, I really want to thank you for being with us at this podcast. I apologize for misidentifying your year of graduation, Malden High School, class of 1960 rules. I'm class of 80. 80 does it best, as we thought, but with all the great alumni that have come out of your class of 1960, such notables, as you mentioned, Norman Greenbaum, Paul Graham, Jordan Shapiro, yourself, and so many others. Great classmate, really. The Malden High School tradition really holds true. The colors are the blue and gold. And also, I congratulate you, Paul Sr., on just a great career and really making a difference in the world of marine biology, ocean life, and all. So thank you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that, Paul. And in the kind of the parlance of the whale world, it's nice to be in a pod of Paul's for your podcast.
Oh boy,
Am I going
I
to
don't
make
know,
the
but
comedy cut?
yeah,
Yes.
that's sure. No, I just wanted to close by saying my dad's career and the people that he's affiliated with, even the class 1960 has welcomed me in and made me an honorary member of that class. I went to my dad's reunion, saw Norman, had some laughs with him. There's a whole nother story that I could go down that road, Paul. As you know, we sang together at Pearl Street, Spirit in the Sky, and karaoke with Norman Greenbaum is one of the things I'm not going to forget. Some of the friendships and connections that I've made through my dad's career, and you guys being one of them, Paul. A girl from Spain I met on the boat on the American Princess. She's an artist. Josea in Africa had lunch with an ambassador. There's many stories to talk about, Paul. So we'll have to come back.
Well, I look forward to that. And as I said, I have refrained from making any puns, any jokes, but think that Paul Sr. mentioned it really best with the Paula Pods. We took that hook, line, and sinker. On that note, well, again, I thank you, gentlemen, for a great podcast and looking forward to more podcasts down the road. So, again, gothamwhale.org, Mr. Paul Sieswerda Sr. and Mr. Paul Sieswerda Jr. Paul L. PJ, thank you
Thank
so
you, Paul.
much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Hashtag Paul Ponders. I want to thank you all again for joining us, for listening in, for subscribing, logging into hashtag Paul Ponders. Techie Tolonzo in the control room doing a fabulous job. It is so great to be part of the Pod Pro entertainment platform with all the great entities, all the great podcasts that you have on Pod Pro Entertainment. Again, check us out, paulponders.com, psnallmarketinggroup.com. People have been asking me about sponsorships. Well, if you're interested in sponsoring, being a sponsor on paulponders.com, hashtag Paul Ponders, please let me know. Just shoot me an email at paul@paulponders.com and I will happily get back to you and we could talk about commercial moments and all. So again, have a great day, everyone. Hashtag Indeed. I trust that you have enjoyed Hashtag Paul Ponders. Again, my name is Paul Solano of PS and All Marketing Group, and I may be reached via email at paul@paulponders.com to do some more pondering. Many thanks to my longtime collaborative friend and associate Chalonzo Amos of Pod Pro Entertainment in bringing you our fun, exciting, and informative podcasts. You rock, Techie Chalonzo. With psandallmarketinggroup.com, I created a side gig to connect you and get things done. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me at paul@paulponders.com with any questions. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Paul Ponders. Follow us on Twitter at Paul Ponders Pod. Follow us on Instagram at Paul Ponders Podcast. Thank you again for listening to Hashtag Paul Ponders, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, our website paulponders.com, or wherever you stream your podcasts. Produced by Pod Pro Entertainment. Hashtag Paul Ponders lives within a network of podcasts located at podproentertainment.com. Hashtag the new radio. Until we meet again, my friend, stay well. Hashtag Indeed.